Welcome, everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started, right? What do you think? Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Martella Esposito. I use pronouns she and her, and I am the partnerships and evaluation lead at Nava. And I'm really excited today because today we are going to be doing the third and final demonstration day for our API and screener demonstration project with Montana. So if you can go to the next slide. Today we'll be talking about the demonstration project, and I'm here with my colleagues LP and Danielle, and they'll introduce themselves as they begin their portions of the presentation. But we'll be doing an overview of the project in case you haven't been following along or missed maybe the last session or need a refresher. Then we'll talk about what we built. We'll do a demo of a live demo of the screener, what we learned, what's next, and a future opportunity. So take it away, LP.
Thank you, Martell. Yes, and as a reminder, my name is LP. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the product lead on the demonstration project and a senior product manager at Nava. So we'll kick off by talking about the demonstration project and where we started. So we'll zoom out for a moment. Our research on the WIC technology landscape that was published in 2021, a partnership between Nava and the National WIC Association, that research helped define our vision for technology to enable WIC to build tools that are interoperable, speaking together and sharing data via technology called application program interfaces, or APIs, that are governed by an API standard. APIs are software that can connect disparate technologies, tools, and systems to share data. And in our research with WIC agencies and MIS systems, we learned that there are some APIs in use in some state programs to connect data between technology tools. However, they are often built to connect to specific tools and specific MIS, and API use is not pervasive or equitable across the program. So that's where this vision for an API standard comes into play. An API standard across MIS systems could open the program to innovation without needing to make direct changes to an MIS and risk other consortium members with changes. And if every MIS implemented an API that aligned with the standard, and if all MIS functionality was securely and safely available via an API, the barrier to building new ideas is no longer, can my MIS support this feature, or does everyone in my consortium need to agree that they want this feature? Or is this going to add too much administrative burden on staff because the data doesn't talk to the MIS? So this standard, we think, can add additional value because it can make it easier to develop and share tools across agencies. A tool that provided online appointment scheduling could work with any MIS for any agency. And this API standard model, coupled with other modern software development practices like human-centered design, can ensure that new tools meet the needs of all users and promote participant choice without compromising operational efficiency. So we set out to define a demonstration project around the certification and enrollment steps in WIC that could learn towards this vision. How might we prototype an API integration and build evidence for the value of an API standard? And during our 6-month demonstration project, we partnered with Montana to set out to first build an eligibility screener or pre-application and an API prototype to improve participant experience with WIC and reduce barriers for referral partners. We wanted to also learn towards this API standard vision by collecting evidence for the value of API integrations by quantitatively and/or qualitatively showing burden reduction for participants and staff, and overall contribute to WIC technology systems change by sharing learnings from the demonstration project in demo days such as this one. At our project kickoff in April, here's what we thought this product would look like. We didn't yet know much about what the eligibility screener would look like, but we knew there would be a start page, some questions for a user to share eligibility information, and a way to submit this data. An API would facilitate the data transfer from the screener to the Montana MIS system in some way, or a way to mock that out, but we didn't yet know how that would be done. And finally, we knew WIC staff would have to see this eligibility information, but didn't yet know what that would look like. Perhaps it could be a report. We would find out during our discovery phase. And here's another view of what we knew at the start of the project, a draft architecture diagram for a mock API. We started by assuming the prototype tool or eligibility screener would only interface with the mock API instead of directly interfacing with Montana's MIS. At this point, we didn't know what kind of existing API or import-export functionality Montana's MIS would support. So the idea was to mock out what an API could accomplish if it were built into the MIS. This mock API is intending to pretend that it is the MIS, simulating the experience of if the MIS had an endpoint and functionality required for the prototype tool to share data with directly. We've been sharing insights periodically since the beginning of the project, the first being in July when we reviewed everything that we learned and did during our discovery phase. I highly recommend watching that presentation if you're interested. We go over a lot of the initial research that we did, which informed our minimum viable product vision, adding fidelity to the diagrams I just showed you. We talk about concept testing and our initial technical research. And in September, we talked about how we user tested our screener prototype with participants and got feedback from staff, and how it impacted our product decisions throughout the project. I also recommend watching that presentation to dive deep into user insights and technical decisions made throughout the delivery phase. And as we shared in that last September demo day, here is where we landed on our final product vision for this demonstration project. Our minimum viable product was to build the eligibility screener and mock API, have the mock API receive screener data and produce a CSV file with applicant data that WIC staff could use to enter into their Spirit system and take next steps. Though this is still manual data entry, it still allows us to qualitatively and quantitatively measure the burden of inputting data into Spirit that would be eliminated if there were an API governed by an API standard that could do it instead. So now that we're in the final weeks of the project, we've moved into the evaluative phase of our work, focusing on measuring success and reflecting on the product's viability for production use. We continue to approach the project with the service design mindset as well, looking like checking our design assumptions and prototypes with stakeholders, staff, and members, and WIC participants. I'll now pass it off to Daniela to show what we built.
Thanks, LP. And my name is Daniela De Vera. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior designer and researcher here at Nava, and I've been the design lead on this project throughout the 6-month engagement. I'm going to talk to us first about what the end of delivery has looked like since we last spoke. Since we last presented in September, we've been working across a few different technical verticals. So that first one there is that we finished the mock API code. I'm going to share more about how that exactly works later, but we'll go through a very fun diagram. We also built how we convert that data from the screener into a CSV for staff to consume. This middle vertical is finishing building out and refining the eligibility screener front-end features. This includes stuff like reviewing and editing data before a submission, working on the navigation and page routing, having semantic URLs for each of the pages, refining the clinic search interaction. So now like a user will see 4 clinics to choose from at first, and then they can choose to see more, things like that. We also planned and facilitated quality assurance or QA testing, both internally that we did with our team and also with 5 clinic. Sorry if my video is moving. So internally with 5 clinic staff members, internally and with 5 clinic staff members from WIC clinics. I'll share a little bit more about what we learned from them shortly. But first, I would like to share what all this work has culminated in the final demo experience. I'm going to try and share my screen now and not lose the presentation, but also show a different screen. Can you see the screener now? Thanks, Martel. Yes. All right, so this is the first landing page of the eligibility screener. We are showing that it is for Montana and a little bit of information about what WIC is and the benefits of it. We give a little bit of context for how long this form should take to complete. And at the bottom, we have some contextual links for folks so that they can understand more about Montana WIC, or if they're not in Montana and need to sign up for WIC, where they can go, as well as the USDA non-discrimination statement. And then we take them to a page where we explain a little bit about how this process is going to work. So first, you're going to use the screener to check your eligibility. If you are eligible, then you will receive a call from someone at your local, the chosen WIC clinic, and they will call you to set up a certification appointment. And then you'll complete that appointment with your local WIC clinic. And then just a little bit of expectation setting that this going through the screener is not going to guarantee enrollment in WIC. Your eligibility will be confirmed when you have your first appointment, that certification appointment. Next, we get into some of the questions around eligibility. So first, we're asking location information. Do you live or work in Montana? Next, I'm going to say yes. I'm sorry about the video. I'm cat sitting, and there is a very active cat behind my video, behind my laptop screen. So first question, do you live or work in Montana? Yes. If somebody answers this with a no, then we just take them to a general page that will direct them to signup.wic.com. Next, we're asking about categorical eligibility. So select the following that apply to your household. We know that not everyone who is applying for WIC is necessarily the person who is going to be the beneficiary. Sometimes you are applying on behalf of your child or a foster child, something like that. This kind of covers all of those situations. And we also give a little bit of context around why we might be asking these things. Then we ask if you or someone in your household has received WIC benefits before. This will give staff an idea of what they need to ask when they do that follow-up call, and also be able to know if they can look up somebody's previous record in Spirit. Finally, on this page, we're asking about any adjunctive eligibility. Is somebody participating in another one of these programs and then you need to prove income? These are all checkboxes, or you can say none of the above. I said none of the above, so I'm going to be asked to go through a little self-screener for eligibility. We give a little bit of context here about adjunctive eligibility, but if you're not currently enrolled in one of these programs, you will have to prove your income is within a certain level. And because we want this to be more inclusive than exclusive, we say, hey, if you're unsure about your income, please just continue to apply. Those are details that somebody who is synchronous with you, a WIC staff member, can help guide you through better than we could on this form. What is your household size? We have a little bit of a definition here about what a household is as well. And then someone can say, hey, there's 3 people in my household. Here are what the income limits are. And then we really try to push people through unless they think that they're not going to fall into these below these or above these I lost what I said. Okay, then someone will choose a clinic, and this is the clinic their information will be sent to, and the clinic that's going to follow up with them. So I can enter residential zip code, search, and I can choose a clinic that I would like to go to. If I want to see some more options, I can. I'm going to choose Bozeman. Next, we collect some contact information. So we're collecting first name and last name, as well as phone number. And this is the phone number that a clinic will call you during business hours. We tell somebody that. Additionally, we ask if there's anything else that they would like to share with us at this moment. This can be something like, I'm waiting for Medicaid, or what forms do I need to bring in, something like this. We're curious to see what people would potentially enter into a text field like this as well, but it is not required. At this point, the user has the opportunity to review any information before they submit it. If I notice maybe I answered something incompletely or incorrectly according to my information, I can go back, edit it, and then update it, and I'll see that there now. I feel confident about submitting this information, and now I have a confirmation. A little thank you, some context setting. If you're eligible, you should hear from WIC staff at your chosen clinic within 20 days. a link to learn about other benefits. This will just take them to the Montana website. And then if I wanted to share this, I could start a new application and send that link to somebody. So what happened to this submitted information? It gets converted into a CSV, which is a comma separated values document, and it turns into something like this. And this is what would be sent to staff at the relevant clinic. Now I'm going to try and get back to the presentation and see if that works. Is this the correct slide? Cool. All right, that was our demo. So I just showed that CSV. I want to share how the mock API acts as an MIS, and this is kind of some of the background stuff that was going on underneath the screener, not necessarily visible to users, like not something you would perceive in the user experience, so I want to talk it through. The mock API process kicks off when a user selects submit on that review page of the screener. So I was reviewing my information, I pressed submit. Note that this happens really quickly from a user perspective in real time, but we're gonna go through step by step, but it takes milliseconds. So when the user clicks that button, the browser then makes an API call to the internal eligibility screener API endpoint. That's something in the code. Then the endpoint makes a call to the mock API. The endpoint is essentially acting like an old school telephone operator here. So endpoint connect to API, or sorry, a screener API endpoint connect to the mock API. Now the mock API activates and it saves the data from that submission in the screener into a database. It also now notes that, hey, a new record was created. The mock API then goes back to the browser and says, I created this new record. And at this point, the browser knows, okay, they told me the record was created, so the submission of the data was successful. Now I can show the user the confirmation screen, your information was submitted. Again, really, really fast from a user point of view. In a world in which what we built could talk to the MIS, the mock API here would essentially be the MIS. So instead of an operator connecting the screener endpoint to the mock API, it could connect to the MIS endpoint, and the process would essentially be the same. The data would get saved as a new record into the MIS database, and then it would signal to the browser that new record was created, triggering that we can show the submission screen. We are not directly connecting to the MIS, so we needed to make sure that we were sending the submitted data to staff in order for them to follow up with applicants. So looking at this highlighted orange, the green rectangle is highlighted in orange. That's from the flow above or on the previous slide. Connecting it to here, when the mock API creates a new record, those records are stored in the database, and the mock API, again, knows which ones are new versus which ones have already been exported. We can tell the mock API to export all the new records via command. The mock API looks at the database, creates a comma-separated values document, or CSV, from those records, saves that CSV in an Amazon S3 bucket, which is just basic cloud storage. It also now knows that it can mark those records as exported in the database because it's done that action. So now we have a CSV, it's dated to the time of export, and each record inside that CSV also has a submission timestamp from when it was user submitted. From there, it's up to the defined business process. Who should we send the CSV to at which office? We haven't fully defined all those processes because we're not yet in production. Ideally, this would evolve to be a fully automated process. And of course, if the mock API were in fact the MIS, we were connecting to it, this extra step wouldn't be necessary. All the records would be directly saved into the MIS, not needed to be sent to staff again. So that's what we built, but now I'm going to talk about what we learned from that. First, I'll talk a little bit about the quality assurance testing that we did. So we spoke with 5 members from WIC Clinic staff from 2 different clinics, one in a more populated area and one in a more rural area. In that QA testing, we showed them results from 5 different screener submissions. I'm showing you here. This is fake data. This is not actual information. But yes, this is the CSV that we shared with them. We used some of that interview time as well to collect metrics and ask some questions about burden in addition to reviewing the CSV. And then we also looked at how staff would use this data in conjunction with their MIS, which is Spirit. And I want to share some of our findings over the next couple of slides. The first finding here is that someone's role and experience working for WIC impacted their perception of how useful the screener submission data was. We did see a gap between how folks who did more of the intake and coordination work, or who had previous experience doing that type of work, interpreted the screener data versus folks who do mostly certifications interpreted the data. So depending on their role, this data could either typically impact their day-to-day, or it really wouldn't, just depending on the tasks that they do. During our QA testing sessions, we did have to ask some of the participating staff to kind of suspend their disbelief. So stepping outside their day-to-day to pretend, oh, you got the CSV. This is not necessarily always the best to provide truthful testing results, since you're asking some folks to do some pretending. The second finding here is that staff saw opportunities for how the screener can collect more information to help move towards certification more quickly. Building off the previous finding, staff who are focused more on certifications identified a lot of potential additional functionality that would make this data more meaningful to them. And then the third finding here is that WIC staff is excited about how technology can improve their workflows and participant experience, but they don't want it to come at the cost. They don't want modernization to come at the cost of reducing the personal connection they have with their communities. Everyone that we speak to from the program who works with the program is so generous with their time. They're so knowledgeable, and they're so open to speaking with us about everything that they've experienced and learned. And they are genuinely excited for how WIC can modernize and improve how it serves people. But they also want it to maintain the personal connection that WIC offers. For example, nutritional counseling is not something that should be automated. Services could move more towards more flexibility and meeting users where they are, but there is still an opportunity to figure out how to maintain that personal connection that exists in the program today. I mentioned before, we also asked staff about questions about the difficulty of determining an applicant's prospective and likely eligibility and some of the different process points around that. It was very complicated to also ask those questions during the session. We had to be very specific. But we used base questions and a difficulty scale developed by Don Moynihan and Pamela Hurd from Georgetown University. They're also the authors of the book, Administrative Burdens. These questions helped us understand staff perception of burden through the intake and eligibility determination processes. So this scale and these responses are based on 5 staff members' responses. When thinking about difficulty and burden, something that came up in our testing were a couple things to keep in mind. There are many factors that can impact perception. So as I mentioned on the slide before, someone's role and tenure with the program can impact their experience. Another thing that can impact their perception of burden is just that every WIC case is so personal and unique because everybody's situation is so different. There is a lot of variance from case to case. The other thing here is that we asked about averages and specifically about screening for eligibility, but we heard things about how like the time of the month impacts caseload, which things like that can impact perceived difficulty as well. If we ask at the beginning of the month, people might be feeling a little bit more stressed or overwhelmed versus the middle of the month, there's less incoming casework. You might have a little bit more relaxation. But overall, what we found is that screening for eligibility is not really too difficult a task. If someone comes in and has already enrolled in an adjunctive program like Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, et cetera, the screening is actually not at all difficult. If a staff member is following up with someone who left a voicemail, sometimes getting a hold of them can increase difficulty or burden because you have to actually get them on the phone, but generally it will be quick and easy. We asked a lot of qualitative questions, and so here are just some more insights from those findings. First, building off the previous slide, staff did say typically things are straightforward. The vast majority of people currently seeking WIC benefits in the offices we spoke to are adjunctively eligible, either participating typically in Medicaid or SNAP, or they have straightforward income situations. However, the few cases where a family has a more complicated income situation cause the majority of the burden for the staff that we spoke with. This includes eligibility determination, but also moves into certification. Staff need to see documentation of income in order to truly determine eligibility. We've spoken before about how difficult documentation is in general for many programs, not just WIC, but we heard it again here. It is a really hard problem to solve, but there's a lot of opportunity to improve the status quo. Relatedly, staff cited that they wanted the screener to provide a little bit more information in order to them to feel like they could make it take a decisive action, like scheduling the appointment, a certification appointment. Each WIC case is very different. For simple cases, sometimes the screener was enough information, especially for cases where you saw that adjunctive eligibility. But for the majority of the test cases we looked at, staff wanted more personal information like date of birth to start building out a household and records in Spirit, or start getting income documents to better determine eligibility. Both of these insights are evidence that more features like doc upload would unlock a lot of possibilities for both participants and staff. I'm going to pass it to LP now to zoom us out a little bit and talk about higher level learnings and findings.
Yeah, thank you, Daniela. Let's talk about things we've learned more broadly about WIC through this project. So first, especially in lower capacity states, technology projects can present barriers to innovation. For example, Montana's MIS Spirit has been undergoing a re-engineering project to modernize the MIS system. However, we've heard it's relying on the same backend logic and technology. And since the project is in the testing phase for a launch next year, we weren't able to explore integrating directly with the new Spirit web. Seeing the re-engineering project through to the end, a project that has been in the works for years, was a priority for our stakeholders. And at times we ran into capacity issues. We wanted to work more closely with the Spirit user group or another state, but the lead state on the re-engineering project didn't have capacity, understandably, to take on another project. And the project management office for the Spirit user group was understandably similarly overbooked. This is all completely understandable, but speaks to how important dedicated staff to help with the shepherding of tech projects through is, in addition to procurement and funding. Second, the state agency model was founded upon the principle of build it once and replicate it many times. While in theory this makes sense and was likely necessary for the original push to MISs, we believe that many state agencies' needs have outgrown the state agency model and their consortiums. The consortium model, originally designed to create funding pools and project management power, can actually inhibit agencies from being able to access funding for specific initiatives. Needing to define requirements and priorities as a large multi-state agency group can potentially result in a small state not getting their priorities funded and built. And in turn, this can actually slow down a state agency's modernization efforts and its ability to respond to the needs of their beneficiaries. This also means that if a state has enough money and resources to forego their consortium and do their own project, they can. And it's appealing to do so because they can move more quickly and ensure that how they are spending their money is according to what their residents need. Not every state has the financial ability nor the internal capacity to support technology projects and need to stay within their consortium to move work forward, which can make it harder to keep up with beneficiaries' expectations of modern service delivery. Finally, we learned that Montana employed some workaround technical techniques to compensate for their MIS Spirit, not yet having import-export functionality beyond EBT processing. The EBT data transfer was a unique solution for EBT and not replicable for other data. In order to manage data transfers, tenured IT staff had developed a workaround using different things like PowerShell scripts and stored procedures and Tableau reporting. Staff had also remarked that because this was a workaround using a separate tool, it wasn't clear how long this process would be active, and IT turnover could impact the longevity of this process as well. Institutional knowledge is lost through attrition, especially for custom solutions like this type of data transfer. And also, based on our project, here's how we think an API standard could advance WIC service delivery. Our screener had a lot of positive feedback from users who see this as a step forward for more modern service delivery from WIC. An API standard could lower the barrier to implementing participant-facing products and services like a screener tool like we've built. An agency could procure a standalone product like the screener and connect it to their MIS to get more complete applicant data more quickly and outside business hours. We also witnessed how interoperability would reduce burden on staff. With the screener, we were able to get higher fidelity of information than than when interested folks leaving, with the screener, we were able to get a higher fidelity of information than when interested folks left on voice messages. And with a connected data endpoint, we could reduce the back and forth between things like the phone log or a shared phone, or needing to maintain or check information in multiple places. This frees up time for staff to do more of what they care about, the personal connections made through nutrition counseling. We also saw how our project and potential others could model a different type of technical project for WIC agencies. With an API standard, states could scope something small, know it could be connected to their greater MIS system. This offers the opportunity for smaller, shorter, and more scoped technical projects in order to add functionality to your service delivery. A state might not have to undergo a large and expensive technology project. But of course, as with many projects, there is still so much to learn. This project was scoped to be a demonstration project in a test environment without a production release. So it can be hard to define and measure usefulness in this context without seeing real data and real participants and staff using and interacting with the output over time. For example, a metric we'd be interested in if in production would be, does this screener tool and staff outreach reduce time in certification appointments? Reduce the time to scheduling a certification appointment? We don't yet know, but have hypotheses that it would have a positive impact. Further, conducting time studies, for example, how much time does it take to enter data? How much time does it take to conduct an appointment? And measuring burden in general can be difficult. Prior to this project, Montana also attempted a time study across their certification and enrollment activities, including appointments. However, they found many limitations, understandable limitations, such as a learning curve for observers collecting time data or slight differences in each agency's procedures. We ran into some of these limitations as well as limitations in things like self-reporting, like rounding to 5 or 10 minutes. 5 or 10 minutes feels like a short amount of time, but when looked at in context of dozens of conversations, those extra minutes do add up. And finally, we would still love to learn about other MIS systems in depth to validate different decisions and assumptions we've made about data transfer and staff process based on Montana and its MIS. We've had so many collaborators to thank for participating in and supporting this project through its duration, helping us execute on the scope and fine-tune our learnings. So thank you to Montana WIC, state and IT leadership and stakeholders, staff from the 2 clinics we worked with, One Health in Miles City and Gallatin County WIC. Thank you to the Spirit user group stakeholders who helped us access a test instance. And thank you to all of you today for your continued interest in our work. I'll now hand it to Daniela to begin to close our presentation with what's coming next.
Thanks, LP. So I'm going to walk us through a little bit of what's next. First, focused on the eligibility screener. Coming soon, we're going to be publishing everything that we've spoken about in the last couple demo days, as well as today, as well as a ton of the materials that we generated throughout this project into a comprehensive case study. This will be about our project process, the product evolution, all of our learnings and recommendations. For the screener, we've also scoped out what a production phase for the eligibility screener could look like. We've drafted a scope of work to share with state leadership so that they can understand what they would need to do to bring the screener we built to production in their state, as well as manage hosting and maintenance of the screener as a managed service. I believe this will be included in the case study as well. Now I'm going to talk about what's next for advancing the API standard. So through this project, we believed in API standard more strongly than when we started. Without an API standard, the chasm between smaller consortium states and larger states who can afford to build their own systems will increase. Our user research showed that participants yearn for a more hybrid online and offline experience with WIC, and more easily being able to share and transfer data between tools can accelerate WIC agencies toward this type of user experience. Further, without an API standard, we believe that staff will become the crux of modernizing service delivery. You may recall us mentioning that Montana's MIS does not have any import or export functionality. We've talked about it before, we talked about it today. And instead, Montana's IT department configured workaround procedures to transfer data from one tool, like their texting solution, into Spirit. This is not only brittle, but it is also burdensome for that IT staff. And this is not an uncommon solution for staff and working with their MISs across the country. Further, MIS systems are the source of truth for WIC participant and eligibility data. WIC staff preserve the integrity of that data by not currently entering application or potentially eligible participant data, at least in Montana. An API standard could preserve this as the source of truth and prevent the current state of creating new sources of data. Staff are also just incredibly innovative, and they're providing amazing on-the-ground service delivery for clients in their own personalized ways, sometimes at their own expense. And this would enable us better supporting innovative staff and using technology to help scale their innovations, and not just let them stay within one office. So this is what we envisioned the path to an API standard being. First, and at the top in the gray, this harkens back to just kind of what our delivery process is like: foundational, then iterative, then evaluative. So first, what we see as kind of like the big step is just understanding the data and defining functionality. So through more explorative or demo projects, we could learn more about what data transfers happen across enrollment and certification and figure out more of these mock API endpoints, essentially. Next, the big kind of bucket of activities are build and test. This would include things like establishing an overseeing committee and a governance model, and then moving towards outlining what the desired endpoints inside an API standard would be and what those data transfers would be, as well as standards, guidelines, and instructional content for how the API should be built and operated and maintained. Then the next big phase here is implement and maintain. So this would include things like helping move MIS vendors towards API implementation projects and connecting digital tools to MIS systems according to the standard that we define as part of the build and test phase. All right. Now I will pass it to Martel to talk about our next focus and close this out.
Thank you so much, Daniela and LP. It was really nice for me to see the full project put together in that presentation as well, even though I've been following it very closely and part of the team. Very well done. Thank you so much. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's next. So we are going to continue learning about WIC technology challenges and opportunities and sharing out what we learn, as well as sharing out about modern software development practices and recommendations to support WIC modernization. We'll do this by continuing to host office hours, learning sessions, and public demo days like the one today. We are also part of the WIC Technology Resource Group, which is a partnership with the National WIC Association. And almost every month we offer an opportunity to come spend time with us and learn about a modern software development topic. And actually in December, we are going to be focusing on plain language. So how do we talk about WIC and all of the wonderful policy and technical and medical jargon that comes with WIC? How do we best talk about it in concise, understandable language for the target audience, for applications to outreach materials, websites, and technology tools? So we're excited for that, and we'll be have a special guest from the Service Design Collective joining us for that one as well. We're also continuing our advocacy and outreach efforts with like-minded organizations interested in pursuing or investigating, learning, demoing additional projects related to an API standard. So if you're on this call and you are one of those that are excited to talk more about an API standard in the WIC program, please do not hesitate to get in touch. We're also working with the National WIC Association on a second updated landscape assessment of enrollment and certification technology, and that will be published either later this year or early next year. And You may or may not recall the first landscape assessment we worked on with the National WIC Association was in mid-2020, so very early days of the pandemic. So we're really excited to see how the landscape has transformed across all state agencies. We've had the wonderful opportunity to understand and know Montana very, very well, and the privilege to do so. And we're also in the process of understanding some of what's happening in other states, and we'll be sharing that out as part of that report. Yes, so we are also, let's go to the next slide. This project is wrapping up, and as we're wrapping up this project, we are actually going to begin a new philanthropically funded project of a recertification portal. So functionality that would contribute to the recertification process and also the certification process. And we are going to be working with Montana on this project again. And there are a couple of things that we're doing a little bit differently with this project. One of them is that we are going to be recruiting a participant advisory council. So throughout our Screener Tool API project with Montana, we engaged participants, but this is going to be a more formal group that they are going to be consultants from start to finish. The same group will engage throughout the project. So we're really excited about that. We'll also be putting this recertification portal functionality into production. So it will actually be in use with real participants and staff during a pilot phase. So we're really excited about that. And during this project, we'll be seeking to understand what is most valuable and viable features for participants and staff in Montana. But also that brings me to the next slide, which is we're calling on other states to join us on this next part of the project, or next project journey as advisors. So we are inviting other states to join us and provide insights and feedback along the way in an effort to build portal modules that are more easily transferable to other states. And I should mention again, all of the work from the first demonstration project and this project, everything is open source, it's philanthropically funded, so it's openly available, everything that we build. So we would love to have other states involved so that we can be thinking about better transferability from the very beginning for these different products. And all state agencies are welcome to join, regardless of consortium status, regardless of whether you already have a portal. The commitment is 2 to 3 hours per month, and the plan is to have about 2 meetings per month. And some of the reasons why you might consider joining. So maybe your state does not have a portal and you're interested in some of this functionality. You can help inform those modules, those portal modules, and the toolkits that would make it more easy to transfer the technology to your state. You can also join because you want to share challenges, opportunities, and lessons learned from your own state's portal or other technology projects. Or maybe you're really interested in learning more about practices for engaging participants in a technology project or in technology projects. So you might have a portal, you might have have enough going on technology wise, but you want to learn how you can engage participants effectively throughout the whole process of your current projects. You can join this project as an advisor and learn our process firsthand for engaging participants throughout. So if you're interested, you can please contact me. My email is provided there. Or if you'd like to learn more about the project, we have a much more detailed statement of work crafted that we can share with you if you'd like to see that before you sign up for anything. But yeah, we welcome any state agency staff that want to join, and we would potentially be open to local agency staff as well, depending on how many folks come forward. So if you're interested, if your interest is piqued by this, do not hesitate to reach out. So with that, thank you all for going on this demonstration project journey with us over the course of these 3 demonstration projects. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to talk about anything that we've talked about during any of the webinars. Yeah, so thank you. And would like to give a special shout out to the delivery team, so LP and Daniela, and we have several other colleagues on the Nava team. Special shout out to the Montana partners and to our funder, Schmidt Futures. So thank you everyone. Okay, we've got some questions coming in. The first one, Daniela, did you draw the beautiful illustrations?
I just answered in the chat, but I did
Okay,
not.
nice.
But they're wonderful.
Yes, so the last one is from Massachusetts, but the other illustrations are actually from our brand. The if you go to slide 39, maybe, yeah. Our Nava's rebranding process, and the illustrator actually think is a colleague of one of our colleagues, former colleague of one of our colleagues, professional illustrator, but they are beautiful. We got to thank you so much for this presentation and all your work on the project. Yes, I'll echo that. Let me see, actually, now that I think of it, I'm just looking in the chat. I should see if there's any in the Q&A. Nope. Yeah, so we'll take any questions, and we're happy to stay on to answer any questions. Yeah. Will the recording of the webinar demo be available? Yes, the recording will be available. Another compliment. This was a very good presentation, so well put together. Thank you. Yes, very, very good, everyone. Yeah, we'll just wait, see if anyone has any other questions or thought.
I can answer this one.
Okay, great. Daniela.
So the question is, in the screener, clients were asked if they lived or worked in Montana. Does working for Montana qualify them as participants? It was actually asking if folks live or work in Montana, because there were some cases where people were either attending medical appointments or working in the state of Montana, even though they might live in a different state, especially in like border towns. It's actually like quite common to like live on one side and then do your business on the other side. If they were spending their money in Montana, so if they were planning on going to the grocery store in like the biggest town, which was in the state of Montana, then Montana WIC would actually intake their application and do their certification for them. They would have Montana WIC even if they residentially lived somewhere else. But that's one of the kind of like more complicated things that you really just do need to talk to someone in a certification appointment to kind of sort out all those details. And then we need to verify that they're not doing benefits in other states as well. But yeah, that's another reason why we push folks towards, if there's a complication, do talk to somebody because they can help you navigate that in a more specific context.
Yeah, we'll also wait to see if there are any other questions or comments. I have a question. I'm gonna put LP and Danielle on the spot. What was the best part about this project? Or like, what was the most interesting thing you learned about this project from your perspective? Or if you need time to think, we can just put it in the case study. I was just curious if you had anything off the top of your head.
I think my favorite part of the project was talking to WIC participants and WIC staff during the research and co-design sessions. I think I learned something new and more nuanced each time. And some of the insights Daniela shared about how passionate and dedicated WIC staff are came through in every conversation. And that's just inspiring for why these types of projects are so great to try to continue to enable and reduce the burden on those staff that are dedicated to help. So I'm excited about the prospect of something like this going into production and helping staff in that way, and also excited at the prospect of additional functionality that will help us not only reduce burden on participants, but truly reduce burden on staff.
Great, thank you.
LP kind of stole mine. But talking to folks, like both participants and staff, like I agree, just learned so much from staff. They were so incredibly generous with their knowledge. And like, I learned so much from just watching them do their jobs. And then also speaking with participants, like everyone we spoke with, like really values the program and like the opportunity that it creates by having this benefit. People talked a lot about like the value of being able to stay at home for a little bit longer after you have a child, for example, because there's a little bit more like financial support there. So hearing those types of things and just hearing how much people valued the program was really meaningful. Sometimes it also like honestly made it a little bit hard to do research because everyone was like, but it's great. Like, I don't really have anything to complain. So you kind of have to like dig a little bit deeper with them. But I also think that kind of speaks to a lot of the personal connection that people create, that the WIC staff creates for participants. Like there are things that can be improved, but people generally had a lot of positive things to say about the program.
Great. And with that, I don't think we've had any other questions or comments stream in. So I think we can wrap up and end the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.